Before we start, make sure to like and subscribe for more educational English videos like this one. Asterisk a new beginning in a different city. Last year, I made one of the biggest decisions of my life. I left my hometown and moved to a completely different city for a new job. At first, I was very excited, but at the same time, I felt nervous because I didn't know anyone there. When I arrived, everything seemed unfamiliar. The streets were busier, the buildings were taller, and people looked like they were always in a hurry. During the first few days, I spent most of my time trying to find my way around. I often got lost, even when I used a map on my phone. However, after a while, I started to recognize certain places, like the small cafe near my apartment and the park where people walked their dogs in the evenings. My new job was also quite challenging in the beginning. My colleagues were friendly, but they all seemed very experienced. I was worried that I wouldn't be able to keep up with them. On my first day, I had to attend several meetings, and it was difficult to understand everything because people spoke quickly and used technical terms. Despite these difficulties, I didn't give up. I asked questions whenever I didn't understand something, and my co-workers were always willing to help me. Slowly, I began to feel more confident. After a few weeks, I was able to participate in conversations more easily, and I even shared some of my own ideas during meetings outside of work. I tried to build a social life. At first, it wasn't easy. I missed my old friends and family, and sometimes I felt lonely, especially in the evenings. However, I decided to join a local language exchange group. This turned out to be one of the best decisions I made. I met people from different countries, and we practiced speaking together while also learning about each other's cultures. One day, I met a person named Daniel at one of these meetings. He had also recently moved to the city, so we had a lot in common. We started hanging out on weekends, exploring different parts of the city, trying new restaurants, and attending local events. Thanks to this friendship, I began to feel more at home. Looking back now, I realized that moving to a new city was not only a professional change, but also a personal journey. I learned how to be more independent, how to adapt to new situations, and how to communicate more effectively with different types of people. Of course, there are still moments when I miss my old life, but overall, I feel proud of myself for taking this step. It taught me that even though change can be difficult, it often leads to new opportunities and personal growth.
From routine to change, a year that transformed my life. If someone had asked me 2 years ago what my life looked like, I would have described it as simple, predictable, and maybe even a little boring. I had a stable job, a small group of close friends, and a daily routine that rarely changed. Every morning, I woke up at the same time, had breakfast, and went to work using the same route. In the evenings, I usually watched TV or scrolled through my phone without thinking too much about the future. At that time, I didn't feel unhappy, but I also didn't feel particularly excited about anything. It was as if I was just going through the motions of life instead of really living it. I often told myself that one day I would try something new, travel more, or learn a new skill. But I never actually took action. Everything started to change when a new manager joined our company. Her name was Laura, and from the very beginning, it was clear that she had a different approach to work and life. She encouraged everyone to step out of their comfort zones and take more responsibility for their personal development. At first, I didn't pay much attention to her ideas. But over time, I began to notice how motivated and energetic she was. One day, she asked me a simple question during a meeting. What do you really want to achieve in the next year? I was completely unprepared for this question. I hesitated for a few seconds and then gave a very general answer about improving my performance at work. However, her question stayed in my mind long after the meeting ended. That evening, instead of following my usual routine, I sat down and started thinking seriously about my life. I realized that I had been avoiding change because I was afraid of failure. I preferred staying in a comfortable situation rather than taking risks. But deep down, I knew that I wanted more. A few weeks later, I decided to take my first step toward change. I signed up for an evening course to improve my English skills. At first, it was quite difficult. After a long day at work, I often felt tired and unmotivated. There were moments when I thought about quitting, but I reminded myself why I had started. In the class, I met people from different backgrounds. Some were students, others were professionals like me, and a few were even retirees who simply wanted to learn something new. Listening to their stories inspired me. I realized that it's never too late to start something different. As my confidence improved, I began to make other changes in my life. I started waking up earlier to go for a short walk before work. This simple habit made a big difference in my mood and energy levels. I also reduced the amount of time I spent on social media and replaced it with reading or practicing English. After a few months, something unexpected happened. My company announced an opportunity to work on an international project. This role required good communication skills in English and the ability to work with people from different countries. In the past, I would have avoided such an opportunity, but this time, I decided to apply. The selection process was not easy. There were interviews, group discussions, and even a presentation that I had to prepare in English. I was extremely nervous, especially during the presentation. My hands were shaking, and I made a few mistakes while speaking. However, I didn't stop. I continued until the end. A week later, I received an email that completely surprised me. I had been selected for the project. Working on this project was one of the most challenging and rewarding experiences of my life. I had to communicate regularly with team members from different countries, attend online meetings, and solve problems in a fast-paced environment. At times, I felt overwhelmed, but I also felt proud of myself for handling these challenges. Through this experience, I learned that confidence doesn't come from being perfect. It comes from trying, making mistakes, and continuing despite difficulties. I also realized how important it is to surround yourself with supportive and motivated people. Looking back, I can clearly see how much I have changed in just 1 year. My daily routine is no longer boring or predictable. Instead, it feels meaningful and full of possibilities. I still face challenges, and I still have moments of doubt. But now I know that I am capable of growing and improving. If there's one thing I've learned from this journey, it's that change doesn't happen all at once. It starts with small steps, one decision, one action, one moment of courage. And over time, these small steps can completely transform your life.
An unexpected journey and the lessons it taught me. A few months ago, I decided to take a short trip to another country. I had been working very hard for a long time, and I felt like I needed a break. At first, I wasn't sure where to go, but after doing some research online, I chose a city that I had always wanted to visit. I planned everything carefully. I booked my flight, reserved a small hotel in the city centre, and even made a list of places I wanted to see. I was very excited because it was going to be my first solo trip abroad. Although I had travelled before, I had never done it completely alone. On the day of my flight, everything seemed to be going perfectly. I arrived at the airport early, checked in without any problems, and found my gate. While I was waiting, I listened to music and imagined what my trip would be like. However, things didn't go as planned. About 30 minutes before boarding, there was an announcement. The flight was delayed due to bad weather conditions. At first, I thought it wouldn't be a big problem, but as time passed, the delay became longer and longer. Eventually, the airline informed us that the flight had been cancelled. I felt frustrated and disappointed. I had already taken time off from work, and I didn't want my entire plan to be ruined. Many passengers were angry, and the airport became very crowded. People were standing in long lines, trying to talk to airline staff and find alternative flights. At that moment, I had two choices. I could either get stressed and complain like everyone else, or I could try to stay calm and look for a solution. I decided to stay calm. I opened my phone and started searching for other flights. After about 20 minutes, I found one leaving early the next morning. It wasn't ideal, but it was the best option available. I quickly booked it before the seats were gone. Now I had another problem. I needed a place to stay for the night. Since all the hotels near the airport were almost full, it was difficult to find a room. After calling several places, I finally found a small guest house about 15 minutes away. It wasn't luxurious, but it was clean and affordable. When I arrived at the guest house, I felt exhausted but also relieved. The owner was very kind and welcoming. She offered me a cup of tea and asked about my situation. When I told her what had happened, she smiled and said, "Travel is always an adventure. Sometimes the unexpected moments become the best memories." At the time, I wasn't sure if I agreed with her. The next morning, I went back to the airport and successfully boarded my new flight. When I finally arrived at my destination, I felt a strong sense of accomplishment. Despite the difficulties, I had managed to continue my journey. During the rest of my trip, I tried to stay more flexible and open-minded. Instead of following my original plan strictly, I allowed myself to explore freely. I talked to locals, tried new foods, and visited places that weren't on my list. One of the most memorable moments happened when I got lost in a quiet neighborhood. At first, I felt a bit anxious, but then I decided to ask someone for directions. The person I approached didn't speak much English, but we managed to communicate using simple words and gestures. In the end, not only did I find my way, but I also had a meaningful interaction with someone from a completely different culture. By the end of the trip, I realized something important. Traveling is not just about visiting famous places or taking photos. It's also about learning how to deal with uncertainty, how to communicate with others, and how to adapt to new situations. When I returned home, I felt more confident and independent than before. The trip didn't go exactly as planned, but in many ways, it was even better now. Whenever I face a difficult situation, I remember that experience. It reminds me that problems are often temporary and that there is almost always a solution if we stay calm and think clearly.